Hello. Wendell Brown here with Tragedy into Triumph. Americans have a big healthcare problem. Over 100 million Americans carry some form of medical debt while at the same time are overpaying for their health insurance costs. Christians don't have to buy in to a broken system because Christian healthcare ministries is there as a biblical alternative at half the cost of traditional insurance. You can enroll at any time and you can find out more information at chmministries.org/triumph. That's chmministries.org/triumph. Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Tragedy into Triumph podcast. And today we are going to focus on three different types of struggles that we all face in our lives. I know sometimes we talk about specific things like adversity or depression or addiction and many other types of tragedies that we're going to face in our lives. Today, we're going to look at three overarching themes in an effort to help us know how to respond to them, because we believe here at Tragedy into Triumph that God is the one who gives us the strength to overcome. But recognizing what happens in our lives gives us the ability to have the right posture, the right framework, the right heart as we seek to overcome the various struggles in our lives. I'd like to start today by telling you a story about a man that I have so much respect for. Al is his name, and Al grew up in a home that was anything but functional. His father drank and was abusive both mentally and physically. Can you imagine seeing your father pointing a gun at your mother and proclaiming that he was going to kill her? That was the world that this little boy found himself in when he was just 9 years old. Al did the only thing that a little boy of his age knew to do, and he ran 3 blocks over to get his grandmother and frantically told her what was happening in his home. The two of them rushed back only to hear the pop of a gun as they entered the house to try to discover that his father had shot and killed his mother. I was placed then under the care of his uncle, but that was not a stable environment either. His uncle possessed the same abusive nature that his father did. And when Al was 12, the uncle told him to get out of his house, and that's exactly what little 12-year-old Al did. He packed his clothes in 2 paper bags, and he set out on his own thinking, anywhere is better than where I am. At a young age, he learned what it was like to bounce from place to place, and he never knew the love and support and nurturing that should have been given to a young child who had endured so much trauma. He spent many nights all by himself alone. There were nights he would sleep in a junkyard. Other nights he would stay with friends. He turned himself into Child Protective Services only to run away 3 weeks later. And finally, he was put into a boys' home only to have his aunt and uncle take him into their care again. And once again, he was physically abused by his uncle. In Al's own words, he said, "I wish they would have left me in the boys' home." By the age of 18, Al had experienced more heartbreak and loss and difficulty than most people do in a lifetime. Yet if you met Al today, you'd never know it. Today, he's a successful businessman. He has a beautiful family and is the proudest granddad you could ever meet. What brought this transformation to Al? How is it that he's able to not repeat the cycle of abuse and alcoholism that he knew? What internal change prevented him from ending up like his uncle and instead being one of the kindest men you could ever meet? Those are great questions. And I hope today that we'll gain some understanding for these answers. It's remarkable to consider how one individual could overcome such incomprehensible odds. Yet many people today, they struggle with circumstances that may not seem as large to the casual observer, but boy, for some of them, they are insurmountable. The struggle is literally real for everyone. Perhaps you have a story like Al's, or maybe your story is entirely different. Every person on earth faces adversity at some point, and some may face, obviously, more than others. Everyone, though, is going to struggle with something. Adversity is different for each of us, but the severity, its exact effect, it's all dependent on how each person processes their experience. I think it's something for each of us to remember that when we meet someone who is angry or bitter or shy or overconfident or fill it in, I think it's important to remember that everybody's got a story and everybody has struggled with something. I'd like to remind us that overcoming is important, and identifying the struggle, I think, can help us determine the most appropriate response for whatever struggle we're going to go through. So listen, don't go to sleep on me yet, because I think identifying the struggle can help us determine a response. But I promise we're gonna kind of get through this today, and I hope the journey will be worth it for you. So if I were to ask you, what is your struggle? People will respond with something like, well, I struggle with anxiety or depression, or I struggle with addiction, or I'm struggling in my marriage. Now, while each of these are certainly a struggle, I'd like for us today to simplify our thinking just a bit more by placing them into three different categories. And these three different categories, I think they need to be identified in our lives. The first category comes from circumstances, places, and actions against us that are out of our control. And we're going to call this struggle receptive struggle. What is receptive struggle? Super glad you asked. Receptive struggle is similar to what Al experienced. Al didn't ask to be born into the family he was born into. He had no control over his violent and alcoholic father. He couldn't change where he grew up, or he couldn't change what happened to him. He couldn't protect his mother. The trouble in Al's life was literally thrust on him by the decisions and the struggles of others. Receptive struggle is difficult to overcome because of one simple but extremely challenging question. And that question is why? The question hangs in the air like an indictment, like a legal charge. How you answer it affects your life forever. Why did this happen to me? Why would someone do this to me? Why didn't they stop this? Why didn't they see what it was doing? You didn't cause it. You couldn't change it. And yet here you are receiving the brunt of someone else's struggle. Receptive struggle can be so damaging to our own sense of value and worth because most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it is those closest to us that hurt us. It's not fair to you, but it's yours nonetheless. Their decisions have become such a barrier in your life that you wonder how you're even going to manage. There are all kinds of receptive struggles that people experience. And I'm sure many of you listening to this podcast today, you've experienced a number of them. There are people listening that have probably endured abuse, or they had a spouse that cheated on them, or they trusted someone with an investment only to have the person defraud them. It's feasible that life was going good for you until that moment that the person stabbed you in the back at work and took credit for your idea, or stole the promotion that was rightfully yours. This struggle is real. You were doing just fine until that person hurt you deeply. There are countless examples, but they all have one thing in common. Receptive struggle kind of forces us into a defensive position as others hurt us. And in the process, it erodes our confidence, challenging the core of our being. It has a taxing effect on what we believe about ourselves and the things that we believe about others. Along with the why questions come the what ifs. It's at this point where I think we can start to believe that we are responsible for whatever happened to us. What if and it's not true, but it's part of the what ifs. What if I had responded differently? What if I had avoided that conversation? What if I were not in their life? Maybe they would be happier. Fill in the blank. Make no mistake, though, you are not responsible. This happened to you. You didn't create it. And receptive struggle is like the gift you didn't want that keeps on giving. It can be overcome, but that requires retraining our heart and mind in what we believe and how we process their struggles. I wish it were the only struggle. I wish. Hey, but it's not. The next one is responsible struggle. Now, in this one, in responsible struggle, there is no one to blame but you. You're the one. You're the one responsible for the circumstances in your life. You took the first drag of that cigarette and now you're addicted to nicotine. You gave into that pressure and you can't seem to get through the day without it. You compromised and decided it was worth the risk. And now you are unhappy and you've been divorced 3 times. You decided your car didn't need an oil change for 100,000 miles, and well, lo and behold, you need a new engine. You committed the crime, and now it's your responsibility to do the time. That is what a responsible struggle is. Now, responsible struggle usually begins with one small compromise, which leads to increasingly larger ones over time. Each compromise gets easier and easier and easier the more we settle. And one day we wake up and we look at our situation, we wonder, how on earth did I even get here? Our compromises become easier over time because responsible struggle leads to low self-esteem. We start to believe a narrative that goes something like this: because I have done whatever it is, no one will respect me. I've made so many awful decisions and I'm a horrible person, so it doesn't matter if I do this too. I've already failed so miserably. Who cares at this point? Responsible struggle can be overcome. However, our toughest critic is our own voice, and that voice, I'm sad to say, lives rent-free in our head. The greatest barrier to overcoming responsible struggle is to own our guilt. Additionally, the wreckage it leaves behind is a constant reminder of our failure, which speaks repeatedly to us. You did this. No one's ever going to trust you again. You really messed up this time. They're never going to believe you again. Wait until everyone finds out about this. They will never ask you to participate again. These statements become oft repeated phrases in our head, like the tune of a song that never leaves our mind. And responsible struggle places us in a position of doubt as the value we had is eroded by the decisions that we've made. It's interesting. Again, I wish that this were our last struggle, but there's still one more. That final struggle is reactive struggle. Now, these reactive struggle, these are the ones in which you are forced to react. They seem to have no reason. They catch you off guard because they feel random or a part of the cycle of life that affects us all. What is so unique about a reactive struggle is that they just happen. There's no one to blame. They are simply the result of living on planet Earth. That deer that runs out in front of us from nowhere on the interstate, the tree that falls and hits the corner of our home in a storm, the traffic jam on the way to work when we are already running behind, the phone call that a close friend has passed away unexpectedly, the news in the doctor's office at your yearly checkup that sadly brings you to your knees. In all these cases, you are the recipient of a struggle that you didn't produce. This was not a trial brought about by someone else either. You're forced to react to a external event, an external circumstance that simply just happened to you, and you cannot pinpoint a reason for it. When reactive struggle finds us, it's important to remember that every person on the face of the earth, they have to endure reactive struggles. They're going to happen to all of us. They're actually part of normal life. The danger, though, with reactive struggle is the damage it can inflict on our attitude or on the other people in our lives. The stress it can cause, it can transform your life in a negative way, and suddenly you're interacting with those closest to you in frustration because of the circumstances that you're in. Often these struggles, they're a hindrance to joy in our lives. These troubles are one more item that we have to deal with. They're one more obstacle that we have to overcome. In dealing with reactive struggle, we can find ourselves withdrawing and stopping all other interactions. We put our interests on hold to deal with the moment. It's like the tyranny of the urgent, and not realizing that life is so much more than our immediate struggles. Have you ever been so focused on the struggle that happened out of nowhere in your life that it stopped you from living? Life is more than those immediate struggles. So there you have it. Receptive struggle. There you have it. Responsible struggle. And there you have it. Reactive struggle. If you think about those struggles in your life, you could start to pinpoint, well, okay, I think that one is more receptive. I think that one I'm responsible for. I think that one I just simply reacted to something that happened in my life. Now, what makes receptive difficult is often there at the hands of others. What makes responsible struggle difficult is, well, they're at my own hands. And then what makes reactive struggles difficult is they seem to be at the hand of God. Why did this happen to me? Well, identifying the struggle is hugely important because it can change how we react in the moment. Recognizing the type of struggle also can provide the pathway for us to find our way through it successfully. The first step in discovering, conquering our problem is to determine its cause. If we determine the cause of the struggle, it positions us for success and gives us a starting point to begin so that God can begin his work in us and bring healing to us. Let me give us an example for each one. Let's go with first, receptive struggle. Maybe we could call this repeating the cycle. So, what is the cause? Is it trauma in someone's life? Is it trauma in someone else's life? Is it their situation? Is it their background? Is it their history? Did this person have a bad day and they're taking it out on you? Are you the recipient of their ongoing fight with addiction? It's natural and normal that we receive from others because we were created for connection. We're supposed to interact with each other. The problem, though, comes when we repeat the cycle because we did not take the time to process the effects of those past hurts in our lives. What I mean? Living with the effects of another's struggle can teach us to follow the same pattern in our lives. That's how dysfunctional patterns get passed along to each generation. If we left it unresolved, it will be far too easy to default to the behaviors that have been modeled for us. It is vitally important for us to recognize the cause of the struggle that we're in so that we do not make that problem our own. Let me say that again. It's vitally important for us to recognize the cause of the struggle that we're in so that we do not make that problem our own. If we do not recognize the source, we will be quick to repeat whatever the struggle is in our lives. Understanding that a problem originates in someone else provides a way for us to stop the behavior before we repeat it. So here's a quick example from my own life. I was having a terrible week, and I mean like a terrible week. Life at this point was pretty difficult for me, and I was working a lot at this time in my life. There'd been one fire after another to put out as I worked with individuals of this organization that I was leading at the time. I came home for supper one night to find that my young children were fighting and they needed me to moderate. This was one of the worst moments I've ever had as a parent, by the way. I slammed my hand on the table at supper and with a raised voice, I said this emphatically. I listen to everyone's problems all day long. The last thing I want to do is listen to your problems when I get home. Silence reigned in my house for a split second. No sooner did I get those words out of my mouth when I realized what I had said, and I asked my family to forgive me. Now, what happened? My problems at work were so great that they immediately caused a struggle for my family, a receptive struggle. The difficulty I was dealing with during the day had nothing to do with what was happening in the 5 minutes that I'd been home, nothing to do with it. It would have been easy for my wife to respond in anger at my outburst. It would have been easy to punish my children for doing nothing more than just being kids. And that, of course, would have caused greater issues for them later in their lives as their father took out his frustrations on them. That situation could have been much worse than it was. And believe me, it was terrible. It wasn't great. But recognizing what I was doing caused me to ask my family for forgiveness. I've spent so much time of my life processing struggles. Even so, I was not immune to them. You know, we none of us ever are. My wife Tammy, realizing the source of my stress, she did not repeat the cycle. She didn't raise her voice. And I'm so thankful that the situation did not escalate. And I'm so thankful the Lord showed me that I was causing a receptive struggle for the members of my family. That's one example. Here's the next one, the responsible struggle. We'll call this one choices have consequences. Now, we're all free moral agents. God made you that way. It's important to remember. The next one is responsible struggle. We'll call this one choices have consequences. Now, we're all free moral agents. It's important to remember that God made us that way. We have choices. In this case, you have to ask yourself, who's to blame for this continual struggle in my life? And the finger of that hand points right back at you. You caused it, and you have no one else to blame. You have been given the gift of free will by God. Even though circumstances and events shape our lives and make us prone towards certain behaviors, we still make the choice. We must recognize this and then take responsibility for our actions, because negative cycles can be changed through our own grit and determination as we cry out to God in prayer for help. We do literally have the power to say no. We do have the ability to learn and change our behavior. We can best work through responsible struggle by making a different choice. For example, if you struggle with gambling and you're tempted every day when you pass a casino on your way home from work, make a different choice. Find another route. Let me say it this way. Make a different choice. Find another route home that avoids the casino. Your choice has power in helping you overcome obstacles. Once we admit that we're to blame, we make a firm commitment to change, and we begin to prevail over responsible struggle immediately. This can be extremely difficult to do, but when it is hard to choose differently, those closest to us can help and hold us accountable. More importantly, when we are weak, there is strength available from God if we ask Him. In fact, the Word says that God's strength is made perfect in our weakest moment. So, interesting for us to consider that in our responsible struggle, the very thing that has created the struggle in our life, the poor choice, is the very thing, now the good choice or the right choice, is the very thing that can draw us out. And with God, He will give you the strength to choose the right path. The next one is the reactive struggle. This is the one that comes out of the blue. How did this happen? If you don't know, then you're experiencing a reactive struggle. When there is seemingly no cause, you must recognize that so you can maintain control of your emotions. The surest way to overcome reactive struggle is to accept that bad things happen to good people all the time. If there's no one to blame, then our response must be to adapt and march on. Things happen as a result of living on planet Earth. We got to accept it. You may think that you've had your fair share of problems already. Listen, everybody has. You can let reactive struggle defeat you, or you can defeat it. It is that simple. I know that everyone is looking for reassurance, and I understand that everyone is trying to find the easiest and the best way to manage and maintain their comfort level. But a different approach is necessary if we're truly going to rise above this struggle. Consider this. Either we become comfortable with change or we remain uncomfortable. Let me say that again. Either we become comfortable with change or we remain uncomfortable. Not one thing in your life is going to stay the same, ever. Time, circumstances, people, they're constantly changing. The moment we accept that life doesn't stay the same is the moment we start appreciating the present. When we appreciate the present, we become expectant and grateful for the way things are instead of trying to make every moment the same. When we accept change as a constant, we can begin to find comfort even in the midst of the greatest turmoil. Accept that things are going to change, and you just might find the comfort and the peace needed to overcome reactive struggle. The best way to illustrate this point is to experience it. Try this. At your next gathering with family or friends, make the conscious decision to be in the moment. Put your phone down. Put away other distractions and focus on your company. Live in the moment. Recognize that this moment will never be repeated. It's fleeting, so savor it, enjoy it, and you will find that you will begin to appreciate all of your moments far more than you ever did before. This will actually increase your joy overall. A similar course helps us when times are difficult. Remember and recognize that this moment will also never be repeated. As bad as it is, it's not going to be repeated. Be intentional and be thankful that tomorrow is a different day. That whatever you're reacting to, whatever the struggle is in the moment, it will not last forever. When we become comfortable with change, it actually allows us to find contentment in the moment. Overcoming any type of struggle starts with identifying which one it is. This allows us to process how we need to respond, but that's just the beginning. There's so much more to discover. We also need to make sure that we are true on who we are and what we believe. And I want to close our time together today by telling you that each one of you were made by God. If you have a relationship with Him, you have the power of the Spirit living in you, and that Spirit gives you the ability to be an overcomer. God didn't create you to be a victim of this world. He created you and saved you and empowered you through His Spirit to be a victor, not a victim. So, if you feel like a victim of the world today and you're a believer, remember Jesus is living inside of you. There is always hope because of Him. If you don't have hope today, if you're not a believer today, and maybe you're in one of those struggles, you're in a receptive struggle or a responsible struggle or a reactive struggle. Maybe you're in the thick of it. You're wondering how tomorrow is going to be any better. Let me give you some encouragement today that with Jesus, again, there is hope. All you need to do is ask Jesus into your heart, ask Him into your life, and you can start to see hope, a light in the tunnel of whatever the struggle is. You can see hope on the horizon. I want to encourage you to walk towards the hope that's only found in Jesus Christ. The word says that if you lack wisdom, He will give it generously. So as you live your life day after day, continue to ask Jesus for wisdom, and He'll give it generously to you, and He will help you overcome any struggle that you can face in this life. I hope these struggles have been beneficial for you today as we've kind of defined what each one of them are. And I hope that each one of you has the strength and the power through Christ to overcome whatever adversity comes your way. God bless each of you. I'm in your corner. I pray for this audience. I want you to experience the fullness of Christ. And listen, if you ever have anything you want to say, boy, drop a note in the comments on our socials, certainly here on YouTube, or even certainly you can email me directly at info@tragedyintotriumph.com. That's info@tragedyintotriumph.com. God bless each of you. Thank you.